I am so delighted to welcome to the stage. We'll give them a round of applause in just a minute. Danielle, Eric, and Virginie. All three are incredible investors and entrepreneurs in their own right with very varied backgrounds, very different investment theses. And what I would say is each of you care passionately about the entrepreneurs that you have the privilege to support, both with funding and with resources and with network. They'll speak a little bit about how they choose organizations to invest in and the kind of organizations they support. But I know of no one better to advise us on how to build resilient organizations than the people who make their living investing in those very same organizations. So please stand up and join me in giving a warm round of applause to these incredible speakers, Danielle, Eric, Virginie. I'll have each of you introduce yourselves, and then we will ask people to come up on stage and ask questions and engage.
Yeah, happy to kick off introductions. My name is Danielle Strachman. I've had a longstanding mission from my early 20s to bring freedom, agency, and autonomy to young people. That's looked like different career moves throughout my career. At one point, I worked a lot with homeschooled students. Then I started a charter school in San Diego 17 years ago. I'm still on the board of that school. It's called Innovations Academy in San Diego. We serve 400 students. I'm making lots of long stories very, very short, but I ended up moving up to the Bay and getting a wild call from someone in 2010 saying, hey, the Thiel Foundation has lost their minds. They're starting this new program, the Thiel Fellowship. They have nobody running it. You have to get over here because of my background in homeschooling and like organizational and educational management. And I ran that program for the first 5 years. We got to work with some really incredible people like Vitalik Buterin of Ethereum, Dylan Field with Figma, Laura Deming with the Longevity Fund, and Ritesh with Oil Rooms, before anyone knew who these people were. They were all between the ages of 17 and 19 when we worked with them. 10 years ago, I ended up starting my own venture fund called 1517 because we also saw how hard it was for young people to be taken seriously by the venture ecosystem. So my colleague and I, Michael Gibson, started 1517 to back those types of young people, people from the applicant pool, people who were fellows, people who had those same attributes that we were looking for. And today our organization is 6 full-time people, 10 with part-time people, and we do angel and pre-seed investing into that specific thesis of working with people who don't have a college degree.
I'm so honored to be on this stage. Thank you, Robin, for the opportunity, and to also do with 2 friends of mine. We've known each other actually for quite some time, so it's always good to hang out. I'm Eric. I'm one of the co-founders at Hustle Fund. That's a pre-seed stage early investment firm. We work a lot with these 2 folks here, actually, and other great humans too. So the problem with VC is that when you have a stage like this in a panel, the VCs tend to spend way too much time on their introductions. I'm not talking about Danielle or Virginie. They're great. They're to the point. So, and you're never going to remember any of it. So I'll share 3 bullet points in my life that I think are kind of unique. There's a saying I heard in church once I think about every day of my life, which is that small hinges swing wide doors. The idea that like experience that you have, a person you meet can inflect your life in a very big way. So first small hinge was September 2000. When I met my wife on the very first hour of college. So we've been together for way over 22 years at this point, 2 kids. Second small hinge moment was October 2012. My wife had a catastrophic rock climbing accident where she nearly died. But being able to witness my friends' reactions, some who are just texting saying like, let me know I can help, and you're being like, that's worthless. And then the others that would just show up at your door and then bring soup, do your laundry, didn't even say anything to me. They taught me that true love is actually a verb, not a noun. So that was a really big moment in my life to just learn that lesson. And then the third small hinge moment was, I'm going to say, July 2015. This is when my first kid was 4 months old. I never wanted to be a dad. I have 2 kids, I know, but like I never desired it. But that was the first time that my son really made me laugh. And then I remember thinking like, I think I like this roommate that we created. So that's 3 small hinges in my life.
How do I follow that, Eric? Come on. Hi, everyone. I'm Virginie Raphael. I run a fund called Full Circle, investing in companies that can help people like me who have had a very nonlinear path and have just learned to tell a really good story. So I'll keep it brief, but if you can always make it make sense, right? In hindsight, I, from France, came here as an exchange student. I was supposed to stay 9 months. A boy and a couple of internships and jobs later, I've been here for 20 plus years. I always wanted to have an impact. And so the version of that impact has evolved over time from working in government, which was absolutely not my speed, to now finding myself in VC in a very random path, which was banking first, public finance, because I thought, well, if I help state and local government to issue bonds for schools and parks, then surely I'm making an impact. And let me tell you, Lehman Brothers couldn't care two shits about impact. And so I went to consulting after that. The firm that I was at got connected early on to a crazy person, not my words, Bloomberg administration words, who wanted to put black cars over the streets of New York City and thought that was cool. And ride sharing was not legal at the time. It was not a thing. It was 2011. Stratus Kalanick at Uber, and he says, hey, by the way, I don't have any cash, so hopefully you're willing to take some Series A stock into a pre-IPO company as part of your retainer. And we crazily said yes to that, and here I was, somehow in VC. So that's the path. And so when the pandemic hit, I thought, well, if I've had that journey, a lot of people feel like they're stuck on some sort of like seemingly linear path or path that they have to make linear and make it make sense somehow. I just want that window of time where so many people saw what was possible that I wanted to give that opportunity to as many people as possible. So my fund invests in exactly that. I want everyone to have the mode of work that suits them best at that particular point in time in their journey. And that will change because life, the world, everything around us will keep changing. And so I just keep going back to if you have the best mode of work for you at that time, and most importantly, you have the words to describe what it is that you do and what is your relationship to that work, then we will all be in a world where people feel fulfilled, have agency. I also have that theme a lot. If you give people agency over what they're doing and empower that, I fundamentally believe that we will all be much happier humans working on all the things that matter toward a better world. So that's me.
Awesome. Thank you all. I'm going to model how the fishbowl works. You walk up on stage, you sit in the chair, and you ask a question. I've been an entrepreneur for 15 years now, full time, across 3 different businesses. And the degree of uncertainty that I see in the world and that I hear from people I employ, especially in my industry, which is primarily making video, is so manic. What advice do you give to your entrepreneurs, to companies that you invest in, to like, what's a tactic that they can use to adapt to this manic rate of change we find ourselves in? Anyone who wants to?
Happy to jump in. One thing that comes to mind when I hear that, one of the things we tell people is that to pursue founding something, our belief is that that has to come from like a deep passion or a mission level orientation calling. And we get lots of pitches from people where you can kind of hear it's, hey, I found this business model innovation somewhere. It's kind of interesting. We personally don't think that necessarily brings someone through the dark night of the soul, which is a lot of this uncertainty that you're talking about. So having something that has some real personal meaning, sometimes there's a background story, sometimes it's something like, I can't not invent, like I must do this type of thing, that calling forward into something gets you through the uncertainty. So that's what we would say to the people that we work with.
Nice. As I keep going back and forth, I'm going to encourage anyone in the audience to come form a line, come down here, and I will bring the mic and you can take this seat as soon as I vacate it. So please come on down and have your question ready. Eric or Virginie, either of you.
There's this story that I heard once. This is about cheetahs, right? I'm inspired by the animals outside, by the way. So now I'm just thinking about animals. So have you ever been to a zoo? Has anyone here ever seen a cheetah in the zoo before? Yeah, they're really cute, you know, they're in nice spots and all that stuff. And, you know, as you stare at these cheetahs, I think over time you start to realize that something is a little bit off about them. So the cheetahs are all animals that can, run at 75 miles an hour, take down a gazelle and all that stuff. But in a zoo, they're being fed like horse meat, like a couple times a week or a day or something. They form bonds with a zookeeper and like are kind of nice and docile. I've even seen a zookeeper rub the belly of a cheetah, which I thought was so cool. I think, for the founders out there, and it's a lot of you in this audience right now, the work that you do is like being a cheetah in the wild. So has anyone ever been like on a safari or something and seen a cheetah in the wild? Oh, some of you, great. Generally, they're starving. If you look at their faces through like a telephoto lens, hopefully far away, Danielle and Virginie, you'll see that their eyes are like kind of crazy. They're in heightened senses. But when you're witnessing a cheetah in the wild, there's no doubt that you're witnessing what God had meant a cheetah to be, which was, hunting what it kills, living to its full existential potential. And in those dark moments, when I was a founder, I had many, many dark moments, Robin, self-doubt and so forth. One thing that was really clear was just like that existential feeling that I'm living to like my absolute limits was there. And it's something that I never could quite feel working for a larger company, right? So it's a lonely journey. You're trying to build something contrarian but right for the world. Everyone's going to self-doubt you for a long, long time, but you're a cheetah in the wild, okay? And I think the other cheetahs in the zoo would look at you if they could and say like, that's how I wish I could live.
I love how you asked for a tactic and you get cheetah in the wild.
Yeah, you're all cheetahs in the wild.
I would just add I think a lot about alignment, because I think at any time where you're just unsure about the future, there's a lot of uncertainty around. Any dissonance that you creates more hurdles toward you actually getting to where you want to be. So, if I'll take the way I build my firm as an example, like if I invest in this future where it's full of individuals who are fractional, I'll keep using quote terms until we come up with better vocabulary, but to me, it would be hugely dissonant to then have a team and turn around and build the team that most investors, the investors in my fund, want me to build, which is like a very top-down, hierarchical, full-time team, because somehow full-time represents more commitment toward me building the firm. I can give you, I'm sure many of you can here too, like dozens of reasons why building a fractional team is the way to go, right? High impact, high value, people come in and out, they do the thing for my portfolio companies, and then they get out and they acquire other knowledge in other organizations and then come back to me with even better ideas that I can then use for, right, my own benefit. But somehow in the LP's mind, it's sort of like, if you're not building a full-time team of people underneath you, surely you're not as committed to building this firm as you say you are. It is hard, right? So I try to think of how do you maintain that alignment in times where people might want you to do different things because of just the way that they're seeing the world. And to fight against that is really hard. So encourage keeping true to your alignment and pursuing with that.
Nice. Thank you. Who has questions?
I just like to try things out. So when you're talking to people potentially to back, and they're coming up with a minimum viable product or prototype that's to put out there, a lot of times when people try to add in inclusion, diversity, equity into that product later on, it feels like a patch. Do you address that at the beginning when they're trying to create something that's going to make it in the market, but to be more inclusive ahead of time?
Yes, I invested in a company called Making Space, and it's a talent platform for people with disabilities. And so their argument from the very beginning is if you built an accessible product from the very beginning, it benefits everyone, right? And disability has a really unique quality to it, which is it can impact women, men, people of different parts of the world, different color, like all of that, right? It's very cross-sectional. It's not even a DI issue. It's even like deeper than that. And so I really paid attention to the fact that this was through and through the way they built the team, the way they built the product, and that they had from a marketing standpoint was not like a label. They very deliberately didn't sort of brand themselves as a DI company, and like disability is not really part of DI usually anyway, which is helpful. I never thought I would say that, but in this crazy world. And so it's, it was clear to me that because of the founder and her journey, she became disabled at a later age, which is another quality of disability. It can like happen to you anytime in your life, right? And so I really appreciated the fact that it was really built in and sort of I am not sort of a DI solution or a disability solution. I am an accessible solution that is just built from day one to benefit everyone.
I find myself really confused by DEI these days, largely because I feel like it's missing the point, which is okay, let's put it this way. So when George Floyd was murdered, there's a lot of people who are signaling that they're really into inclusion, right? And on our side of the table, there are plenty of funds who are like, look, I just invested in a black person or a woman, and so forth. Like it was virtue signaling, right? And I think what was problematic back then, which is still problematic today, is people are misunderstanding that inclusion, diversity is perfectly tied to capitalism, right? And here's like my case. I'm not going to answer it really in terms of like the product design because I don't quite have a perspective on that, but I think about it a lot in terms of the culture that the founders have. Like, are they going to try to make an effort to build a fairly diverse team, you know? And the reason why that matters for me is just a very simple principle that I learned early in life, which is just people are attracted to other people who look like them. So like, let's play this scenario out. Let's say that I'm building a company and I hire 50 white and Asian dudes, and then I meet like Virginie, who's an amazing engineer. I'm like, join us as employee number 51. You'll be the first woman. Like for her, she might be like a genius addition to our team, but she might be like, nah, fuck that. Like what? Like why would I like be join this kind of a culture right here, right? Versus like if that person had done their job right and then built with inclusion in mind, so that you know the first like 20 people that they hire look like the next 2,000. Then there's probably someone on the team that looks just like a candidate they need to hire who also looks like that person, right? And that means for me that this is a better chance that that founding team is going to be able to hire and retain the very best people over time because, you know, startups, I guess any business just always comes down to the talent of the people within the organization, right? And that for me means I'm going to make a lot of money, right? Like because like you're going to be able to continually hire the best people. So that's something that we think about a lot, at least within our firm, is just like, do these people actually believe this idea that setting these kinds of foundations really matter for whatever you're building? And that's the question that we tend to focus on. And I don't know if there's a different perspective on the product that you guys can share too.
Sadly, I also probably don't have that much to add to the product side, but on the founder and working with team side, I think a lot of our founders very much start out as sort of with these underdog stories because no one else will back them. We tend to be the very first backer. And so they are already in this mindset of, hey, talent and great people can come from anywhere. And they're thinking about that and thinking about how do I bring people on who are better than me at all these different skills. I also think our community plays a role in it. We have a community of 5,000 people at 1517. We just had an event over the weekend called 1517 Unplugged, which was this camp out on a YMCA camp out site here in the Bay. And it was really amazing to see because we didn't do like a lot of curation from within the community of like, and we used to do this to make sure we'd have balanced events and things like this of like, okay, we don't have enough women from our community coming, let's reach out to more of them and so on. We didn't do that for this event. And it was our most diverse event we've had. And people commented on it a ton over the weekend. And I think a lot of that is like laying that groundwork over time of, hey, we're going out to different communities, all ages, all stages, everything. And our founders see that, the people we work with see that. And so I think it also kind of starts in our own culture of our fund and showcasing that. And we've had founders come to us and say, hey, I'm concerned we're kind of becoming a bro down. Like, how do we not be a bro down? Where do I go to find candidates? How do I do this? And, you know, give them tactical strategies and places and communities to go to expand their networks.
Thank you.
And I have to volunteer, so my turn. Eric, good to see you again. So I'm a founder of a People First accounting and finance firm, and we support seed through graduation, as I like to call it. And in the last 5 years, I've seen a larger disparity between the companies that are in seed stage and then B and beyond. And watching our clients who struggle to identify what is that magic number I need to get to go for my Series A. And that differs by industry, right? It differs through a lot of different segments. And as an early stage investor, I'm really curious how, from that onset, that conversation is being managed from the standpoint of growth to runway to metrics. Like, how do you define like what those expectations are and really help them get to that Series A round?
Happy to jump in. We think about this a lot at 15, 17 because we're an angel pre-seed fund, typically funding people before they've raised $2 million and earlier. And for what you said is dead on, of like each industry is different. So the way we're going to advise one of our hardware startups is going to be different than how we advise a team that's working in like a SaaS AI product. So we try to look at some level of comparables. We've also built up a network of other investors that we work with, which is really great. And we can search in there and see like, okay, these are approximately what these funds want to see. We think this would be a good intro. Let's reach out and see if they want to take the meeting here. And also adjusting for ourselves, what are people looking at up the stack? What are the seed investors looking for in these different industries? What are the A investors looking for? So then we can report back to founders because it's constantly changing. And especially, I think we're getting a lot happening with the AI boom sort of skewing the data. One of our companies just had a $45 million Series A round, and I was like, whoa, holy moly, that's a really large Series A round. But I'm not going to advise a hardware startup we have in the same way to say, hey, you have to be at this metric. So I think you have to look at it very individually and like try to keep a little bit ahead of where you think the next investor up is going to want. And what we always tell founders is actually there's I'm curious, and there may be some disagreement, which always makes a better discussion. What I tell founders is you want to have the metrics that investor up the stack wants and have that conversation then so they are ready to go through a process with you. I think relationship building is really great at the early stages, like where we sit. But generally, a Series A fund wants to see, okay, we want these revenue numbers. We want the team to kind of look like this. We want them to be based in San Francisco. And what I found over time, which I also found strange being an educator, I love to see development over time. But a lot of times people will box you into that first meeting. It's an anchoring effect. Oh, yeah, I met that team a year ago. They were too early for us. And then they won't take a follow-up meeting. And it blows my mind. But super common, super typical. And yeah, I think it's about figuring out what are the comparables for that market and hitting when you have those with those investors so you look like the biggest fish as you can in that pond.
And I think it's only one part of the story, right? Sadly, it's what I don't like about metrics and milestones is the goalpost always keeps changing. You can always have, and the fear I have often is that the founders hear, well, once I reach $1 million an hour, I'm ready for a Series A. I'm like, well, that's not true. It's not true across industries, and really, you've already covered that. But also some people might tell you that and still not take a meeting because that's not the real reason they don't want to invest in you, right? They might invest in a sub 1 million ARR company at Series A for very different reasons. Like I see my job as, how many funds do I know who truly will understand what that founder is doing and why they might want to back him or her or not. The reason is almost, so you can always hide behind metrics, I think. So I try not to actually do that because what does that mean to invest at pre-seed? What does that mean to be a Series A investor? It means very different things to different people. You need to understand the size of the fund, where they are in the fundraising cycle, who's the partner that you're actually talking to, a host of factors. And so I think there's a little bit of that in VC of like the art of making actually meaningful introductions that will lead to actual results. Because slipping a list of 100 VC that I introduce my founders to is zero helpful to them, right? They have no idea who those people are, what those metrics that they're chasing are. And so it's a helpful indicator of like, don't even try to go out if you're like significantly sub that magical milestone. But I think some founders run to the conclusion that once they have hit that milestone, like surely this brand new world opens up and they can talk to 10 funds who are Series A funds, and that's just not true. So there's a It's a little bit more of an art than a science.
I'll throw a number out there. So we invest in largely SaaS business models, all software at Hustle Fund, and if you're somewhere around like 3 to 5 million annual revenue run rate, that seemed to be the strike zone where a lot of Series A's are happening, at least what we're noticing. But the goalposts, as mentioned, changed so much. I think it's also good to warn all of you that what's good for a fundraising story isn't always what's good for your business, right? Because sometimes you need to present a certain kind of metric, a speed of growth or whatever, and it looks great for a VC, but that doesn't mean anything about whether you should be doing it for your company. Like my first business, I bootstrapped for 9 years. It ended up okay, but like there are periods where we just like didn't focus on growth for like a year. It's just like, nah, all this stuff needs to be refactored. We're just gonna like focus on not growing. And we could do that because no one was pressuring us. And then there are other companies where I was on your side of the table as a founder. I had a bunch of VCs aboard, and they're forcing me to raise. They're saying like, now's the time for you to raise $20 million for your Series B. And I say like, I don't want to. And then they said, you don't have a choice. We really need you to do this. And then they always gave me a murky answer. And then it wasn't until actually a couple of years ago I caught up with one of the guys in my board, and I was like, why did you pressure me to raise so much? Because it kind of like led to the failure of my business. And that's when he said, well, I was fundraising for my own fund at that time. So I needed to show some markups in my own portfolio. And I literally looked at him and said, you are a real motherfucker, right? Like, I can't believe you forced me to do that. You killed my business so that you could try to get that $5 million check for your next fund out of like 500 million or something like that. So it's good to question also the motivation as to like, why are you getting pressure for this? And maybe even I'll throw in the last caveat, which is AI. So like the magical thing about AI in theory is like it should be getting cheaper to start companies, cheaper to scale. I love this notion of seed strapping, which is just raising a bunch of money in the beginning, maybe not that much, and then that's enough to sort of get you going and you grow off your retained earnings. Don't dilute yourself. If there's a path for that, that's also really great too, or just straight up bootstrapping as well.
We had made it 15 minutes without mentioning AI, Eric.
Oh,
We said 20.
sorry.
I wanted to jump on the board issues area because I think it's a really important one. I am becoming really grumpy about venture people on boards at this point. We've been doing what we do for 10 years at 1517, which isn't forever, but it's, a little bit of experience. And what we've watched is, especially in year 7 of a company, it tends to be when the pressure starts coming on real thick from boards about where's that big markup because we're raising our next fund and we need to see this. And I've seen so many times boards go from seeming friendly and supportive of the CEO to nasty very quickly. And what I'm also seeing a lot is large firms having very junior partners joining boards. And to me, it doesn't make sense. And I know a lot of these people. I'm like, this person is a very nice person. They're getting their career off the ground. This is wonderful. They can't manage their way out of a paper bag. They've never run a large company, let alone a small company. They shouldn't be on a board with voting, maybe with an observer seat or something like that. But I am pretty anti-board at this point. I've even been advising some of our companies at Series A, hey, maybe give a slightly better valuation there and see if you can get them to do observer over board seat, and it's working. I don't know why more people don't do this. I think there's lots of different incentives, but like board composition really matters and who's in that seat really, really matters. And you can have a board that seems just peachy, and then year 7, it's not peachy anymore. And they'll make founders feel like it's like their fault and, oh, well, things really haven't been going very well the last 2 years and we've been trying to massage this and blah, 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 and like then take you out of that seat. And it's very scary.
Thank you.
We got Luca, Tim, and then Andy.
Ooh, I'm loving all the real talk on this stage. So I'm excited to be able to ask this question. All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Luca, and I am a fractional chief of staff. And I want to be really clear about who I am as a chief of staff. I am not a McKinsey consultant who is a financial analyst. I am I'm an org developer and a company builder as a chief of staff. And it is very hard for me to find a full-time role as someone who builds companies and who is a seasoned professional. For a while now, I would say at least a decade, I've had this idea and I've had opportunity to talk with folks at VC funds. And when I talked about the other, like, oh, that's a great idea, but nobody ever does it. And I'm just really curious. I'm not curious whether you all are doing it or not, but I'm really curious about your perspective on why the VC industry won't do this. And the idea is that every fund has these incentives that they could require. They could require the founders of their companies to commit to their professional and behavioral development. And they could, they could have someone like me who's in-house, who works with their founders to ensure that they are developing as professionals. I was at Uber at 2017 when it was imploding. And it was imploding because of the culture that was inculcated by its founders, who had zero development. This has a real impact. And I've talked to VC funds who are like, yeah, that's a super good idea, but they won't do it. Like, VC funds just won't do this. They won't commit to the notion that our founders have behavioral metrics that they need to hit, and they have development they have to do. And if they don't do this, they are putting the company's sustainability at risk. And so they're putting our money at risk. And I've been a part of a number of startups. I've seen them from the inside and the outside. And every failure has nothing to do with the product. And it has nothing to do with their finances. It has to do with the way the executive team of that company, big or small, is operating. I'm just super curious because you all are in the industry. You have a lot of experience. You know your colleagues. You know what goes on at other funds. Why won't funds do this? Why won't they hold their company's leadership team as responsible for their development? Why won't they do it?
Great question. By the way, Luca, thank you for the parking tip. I ran into you outside and I was like, where should I park? And you're like, oh, go over there. So I did it.
That's what a chief of staff does.
Thank you so much. More value add than most VCs right there. So we do have a network of coaches that we recommend to our founders once we invest in them. So it's always like a fun conversation. It's like, hey, we gave you some money, and by the way, we expect you to spend some of it on like real development with a co-founding team, right? So you can have a good benchmark. And
I actually, just to jump in, I saw that about Hustle Funds. I've done a little bit of homework before I got up here on the stage with you,
good.
Right?
Yeah.
But I'm not talking about this network that's available, because a lot of VC funds have a network that's available. I'm talking about a requirement that you will hit these behavioral and developmental metrics, or we're not giving you any more money.
Yeah, we haven't gone that far yet, but it's a good requirement. I mean, it's something I'm going to process for sure, because I'd never actually thought of it as part of like our side letter or anything like that. But I think I do have a theory as to why most don't do this, which is deification. Silicon Valley likes to worship the founder as like this all-knowing, all-right person, right? Someone that's like a Steve Jobs, like can see the world in a different way and break through walls, step on people along the way. And actually along the way, we're kind of in an environment where the brilliant jerk is firmly back and actually celebrated. It's okay if this guy is a little bit toxic or a lot of bit toxic, so long as he can break through. Uber is a great example of this. I mean, like, when you look at the original team there, they were actively breaking laws in the beginning with taxi lobbies and everything like that, but they're trying to force their way through. So for some reason, this gets celebrated a lot, right? And unfortunately, there have been enough people who have made a good amount of money supporting those kinds of founders. So it can turn into one of those things where it's just like, because the correlation is there, therefore it's an indicator of success. Versus, I think what you're highlighting, Luca, and which I subscribe to as well, is like they succeeded despite themselves, right? So I think like this kind of hero worship of Silicon Valley can present those kinds of toxic things. So if like you're a VC who's just like, hey, by the way, Luca, I think it's time for you to up-level your leadership and culture. Why don't you get a coach? That person has so much leverage, maybe after a certain point, to say, like, why do I need to listen to you? I'm making you money.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I have told not more than a few founders, if your company succeeds, it will be in spite of you, not because of you. Yeah, I've seen that happen.
I think we have a huge issue with, I know you're super anti-hustle porn. Like, it's just the 996 thing, like, needs to go away. Like, the 996, working 9 to 9 for 6 days a week, or you won't succeed or something, or like, it's a sign that you can like actually not burn out and like do that. It's like, I don't understand what we're doing here. Like, what, toward aim? Why? But somehow it's seen as like, well, I think there's a little bit of a confusion between like, is this your passion? What we were all talking about earlier. Like, do you have such a deep understanding of the problem that you're like giving up your life in the next 10 years to like build this company because you have either you're solving it for yourself because you have experienced the problem really deeply for yourself, right? A lot of founders, that's the origin story of the company. But it shouldn't be confused as like you love it so much that you're willing to do it from like 9 to 9, 6 days a week. I'm like, I don't even know. Like, we're humans. Like, who can work like that amount of time nonstop, and toward what end, right? I think there's a budget issue also in my case anyway. Like, I try to make it part of my due diligence process to actually have a coach. I developed a framework of 9 core characteristics that I think founders should have if they work with us. The firm is called Hardwood Collective. They do amazing work. She helped me develop a spectrum-based rating for each of those characteristics because I didn't want to have a 1 to 5 rating. First of all, it's really hard. You never use the whole scale. And then, all of those characteristics, there is too much of a good thing, right? It's like, there's a difference between following through and becoming so obsessed about following through with me that I'm going to become concerned that you might burn out, because if you're doing the same with the customers and all the investors that you're talking to, like, where's your judgment in terms of like, she's one of many, she may not even come through. Like, why am I spending 26 hours responding to her crazy DDQ, right? And
Yeah, we call that an overdone strength.
Right.
Overdone
And so
strength.
what you want really is a balanced team, right? It's like, it's okay to be on one extreme or the other for 1 or 2 of those characteristics. But if you're like crazy high on all of them, like that might not be a good sign. And so she is part of the diligence process. I have them talk to the team. And yeah, sometimes I don't invest, right? And I still pay her for the work that she did. And so for me, as a $10 million fund, it's really challenging to do that for every company that I look at, right? So I only do that as a final step of my diligence process. But I would 100% do more budget, what you suggest.
Can I just make one really quick retort on the 996 thing? So I'm going to say something pretty controversial here. I'm a huge believer in it. I actually think it's great. However, it makes sense for the founders because they own the majority of the equity. So if you're going to work your ass off on your own passion every day, every hour of the week, great. And in fact, I'm very excited to work with founders who have that kind of level of passion. But if you're that founder asking employee 100 who has 0.01% equity on the upside, then are you saying like, look, I'm producing 10,000 times more value than you, and that's why I'm paying you so little equity and requiring you to work every day of the week? That's a broken social contract. And I actually don't believe that it's fair as to force your employees who don't have that kind of upside to work in that kind of same level. It doesn't make sense to me. Kind of curious about your thoughts.
But then you have to set
I'm going to get off the stage because other people have questions, but go.
Thanks, Luca.
Yeah, but you have to set expectations, because then I think you get into the trouble of, I had this happen with a founder recently, found a parental leave policy, and she did not follow it herself because she's a founder. You're right? It's her company. Like, there are some things that you cannot do as a founder, but as a leader, right? If you have a policy that says you can take 12 weeks off, whatever it was, and you're back 2 weeks later, like, I don't think that translates into people thinking, oh, well, whatever, the policy is here, I'll take my 12 weeks, right? People feel like they can't because they look up to you and you're the leader. Like, unless you're like really deliberate and intentional about communicating that you don't expect people to do 996 when you do, for all the reasons that you mentioned, I'm not sure that translates into a sustainable.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to have these two on stage just debating this topic for an hour next year. As an entrepreneur, just a second, I've never built a company without working 100 hours a week. but also I have a fiance and I want to build a family and I can't do that at the same time. So this is like a fundamental question that I want to hear more of. Here's Tim with another question.
Can I jump in real quick before we jump to the next question? I really want to jump in on the chief of staff thing because I think there's a lot of bullshit happening with that role. And I've seen it again and again and again. I personally think of the chief of staff role as a junior role getting into becoming a professional, not a professional coming into a new industry. And I see this happen all the time. There was a fund that I was mentoring and I stopped mentoring them who brought someone on who was an ex-school principal as their chief of staff. And I asked them, I saw this pitch deck they had, and I said, why is so-and-so chief of staff and everyone else has a partner title here? This seems wild. This person has been a career professional for 15 years. Oh, well, she's new to the industry, and this is where they start. I just think it's complete and utter bullshit. So if anyone in this room has a chief of staff title and you're sort of, you've like forgotten to think about it, those titles should really be things like, you know, operating partner, head of operations, VP, like director of like whatever it is. So thank you for your service, Luca, as a chief of staff, but you should have a different title. Titles are cheap and it's total bullshit. Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to maybe go back to some of the things the three of you said at the beginning. To the dark night of the soul, the cheetah in the dry season, and the nonlinear path. I'm interested to hear, what did you learn about yourself in those moments, in those times, that was important for your success then, that you hold dear now and informs what you do as a founder, as a funder?
So for myself, the probably the deepest dark nights of the soul were when I founded my charter school, Innovations Academy. And we had moments where all our funding fell apart. We had to move our school, I think it was 4 times in 3 years. Like we had to move mid-year because our landlord didn't understand that we were going to have children in a building. And all kinds of problems. But my adage over time has always just been put one foot in front of the other. And for me, it's also about service. And what we used to do is like my old office had just pictures of the children, you know, not even before we started the school, like a room in my house had pictures of the children who wanted to come to the school. I'd be like, all right, I could roll over and go back to what I was doing before and we could call it quits because we didn't get our funding. And these are the children who aren't going to get to go to the school that we're creating because of that. And so now when I'm working with founders, I tell them, you know, we all give the advice that like we wanted to hear. And I always preface like, hey, the advice I'm giving you is all projection. Put pictures of the people you want to serve. Those are the ones that are going to like keep you going on this. And like being of service for me is really, really important. And I found that with a lot of the founders we work with, that is true for them as well. Or think about, you know, it's so sad. We've seen so many companies where something's not working out. They're building a really wildly awesome new technology, sometimes in health tech, med tech, these types of areas. And it's really sad when these things get shelved because they feel the visceral pain of, wow, man, it's not about this like, oh, I made some cool tech and it's going to be in the world, but this is going to really help people. And we didn't quite get there. The market didn't support us. And it's really painful. So I always tell people like, you got to have who you're serving in mind in a visceral way. It's not enough to be like, oh, I'm thinking of them in my head or meditating every day about them. Like have the actual physical pictures.
In the gut.
Yeah, in the gut and like on the wall, like actually on the wall right there. But yeah, feel it in your whole being.
At this point, Hustle Fund is my 5th company. The 4 that I did previously was in your side of the table as founder. I would say that 99.9% of the time it wasn't enjoyable. it wasn't like fun. It felt like every time I was building a house of cards that could be collapsed at any moment. I was an imposter the whole time. I have really strong memories of my first education startup, like one night just like spending the entire night crying in a fetal position in the couch in my office on top of a Chipotle. Smelled really bad, by the way. And just thinking like, am I gonna actually like, where am I gonna come up with $11,000 I owe tomorrow, right? And so I think what I learned from these experiences is my journey is like yours. Everyone here, without any question, is struggling to survive. And like not even just like about our businesses, like there's stuff going on in our personal lives, our parents and so forth. Everyone is struggling to survive. One of the problems of like being a startup founder back in the mid 2000s when I got started, 2005 is when it began. There's this refrain, if like Danielle or Virginie were like, "Yo, Eric, how's it going?" The classic refrain was, "Crushing it." You would just like put on this like fake it till you make it facade, right? And like it turns out that when you put on an affect like clown makeup every day, that is exhausting to present yourself in one way when you're actually feeling another. So I think as part of this social contract that sort of changed with investors like us on this side of the table, I'm just gonna pat ourselves in the back a little bit, is like a little bit more honesty in the relationship of saying like, we know this is hard, we know you're struggling, so tell us about the biggest problem you have right now, and let's try to like figure it out together, which is something I couldn't do with my backers back in the day. But I do like this era of just being really honest with the fact that this is mentally crushing, physically crushing, everything crushing, financially crushing. But we do it anyway because we're cheetahs in the wild.
I think a lot about constraints. So intentionally and deliberately constraining yourself sometimes is actually helpful. And so by that, I mean, when I started the fund, there were many features like that 7-year mark where like, this is all artificial, right? Like I can have a fund that's 15 years, 20. Mine happens to be permanent because I'm like, I don't want to create any room for my founders to just be like, are you actually that person in the boardroom who's like, well, I'm raising my next fund now, so time for markups. It's not going to be on paper, but who cares? It helps me. Like, for them, like they've given up everything they have. I get to invest in 8-10 companies per year. I always tell the founders, it's like, it's your company, not mine, right? I'm trying to understand whether I get the vision and I can get you there and be like actually meaningfully helpful to achieving what you want to achieve. And if I can't, there's a bajillion funds out there. There's a lot of companies. Like life is too short. So I think of like as many ways as possible to like not deviate from that, because you can say a lot of things, right? And when you're fundraising, you can do a lot of things like building the team, right? That I was saying earlier, like I could build a team so that LPs would be like, oh, she's very serious about this. She has 10 full-time people underneath her. Surely this firm is here and built to last. Then I don't want those LPs, right? It's like, if that means saying no to some money, like I refuse to be part of the DEI, like all the banks who wanted a nice little press release of backed X number of women. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. The diligence process is crazy. The side letters they wanted is crazy. The legal terms they wanted for that. Like if that means walking away from money, like I will do that. So the more you can sort of like be very clear on like constraints and continuing to be authentic and like be on your path, and the more constraints you can sort of intentionally and deliberately built around yourself to not deviate from that, is what has kept me going in the way that I wanted to go, where I don't need to like remember what I said I would do or anything like that. It's just I'm not incentivized to act any differently than I said I wanted to act. And like that's helpful.
Thank you.
I got so comfortable.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you. So I'm Andy. I'm a founder. I'm in the 0 to 1 stage, whatever you call it. I am very involved in like thinking about startups and the future of work and all those things and VC scape. And then, that summer when Black Lives Mattered, I took a pause to just do like self-care and reflect. And I'm trying to now, as I think about the company I want to have and shape it, I'm like looking at the VC scape and I'm like, what's going on? Like, things are happening, all that. Do you have any tips of like how to pitch or approach the current state of things?
Or going through a bit of a existential crisis, so that
I
that
noticed.
you have identified it. I would say become ruthless in pre-qualifying people. Like I do that myself, and there's nothing wrong with taking a couple of minutes really early on in the conversation to determine whether it's going to be a fit or not. Because again, life is too short, right? You're wasting my time, you're wasting your time. There's no point in that. I always appreciate founders who try to like tease that out from the very beginning, because there is some degree of usefulness in building relationship early and all that stuff. But like, take the time to understand size fund, where they're on their fundraising cycle, whether there's any chance at all that they would back you, and why not, right? I talked to a lot of investors who had never invested in a first-time fund. I'm like, okay, then there's no point in me talking to you, right? Because if I'm honest with myself, like, why would I be the first? Why? Likely, I won't be. So I think I would really take the time and like, I am not a huge, maybe you have different perspectives, but I don't think fundraising is a numbers game. I think quite the contrary, actually, like quality over quantity, almost, always. And I think it's really important to just be clear on who you actually want to talk to versus not spend like a minute of your time talking to.
I think that fundraising is a numbers game. So our first fund was $11.5 million in 2017, and we spoke to 700 people over 9 months. Eventually, 71 people said yes, and then we were able to get into business. And we talked to everyone. At one point, Elizabeth, my co-founder, was pitching her ophthalmologist, literally as she was getting an exam. I definitely went to my neighbors in my little cul-de-sac saying, like, I'm starting a fund. Do you have money for me? Almost like selling Girl Scout cookies, except worse, probably. You get the payoff, at least with the Girl Scout cookies, like sooner. So I'm a big believer that just like sometimes in the beginning, brute forcing to just get the money to get going is a path. May not be the most efficient path, but it is a path. But I will share just one sort of tip. So I have a singular goal within the first 5 minutes of talking to anyone who's an investor in us. It's actually, can I get this person vulnerable with me within the first few minutes of the conversation? So there's a saying that I try to live my life by. It's a Buddhist saying that I once read, which is, when you bow to the mirror, the reflected image bows back. And I always thought that was like a really cool way of thinking about life, which is like the energy you put out externally is usually reflected back. So if I'm like an insecure asshole to everyone, you're going to be surrounded by a bunch of insecure assholes back, right? Or if you kind of lead with a little bit of vulnerability and love, it generally gets rewarded back, right? And I think all of us have sort of felt some of this in one point of our lives or another. So the reason why I kind of talk about the vulnerability part of it is I tend to find that those who actually engage in that kind of a way relatively early tend to be some of the most spectacular people to work with longer term as an investor or founder or whatever it is. So my trick to doing that, I'll give you like a little tactical trick. I almost do all of my pitching on Zoom, and I never hide my background. I work in my garage, and it's a little bit staged. So all my kids' toys are organized behind me. There's like weights and stuff like that. There's a lot of things. I'm baiting people in the first call saying like, is that an actual background or not? And I'm like, I have my go-to jokes about like my kids' stuff and all that. But I try to actually start by just exposing a little bit of like what my life is. And if I have something that's like mildly vulnerable, just like, I'm trying to think of an example, I don't. But if we can get to that kind of consensus, then I think the overriding thing about early stage, when you're kind of making a bet on someone, is that you're essentially just making 80% of the bet on the team. And we often forget that people like to support other people that they like. Not, let's set aside like the skills, just like, I like you, Andy, like that kind of thing. And they'll make excuses to make it work. But the vulnerability part of it is a great way of sort of seeing that, testing that foundation.
I'm going to riff a little bit off what Eric said, and then I'm going to share a little bit of our own fundraising from 15, 17. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try what you're talking about, but oftentimes we try a little bit with a little humor at the beginning of a call. What's funny is there are major cultural differences in humor. So sometimes what happens is we start with some humor, and And I'm laughing my ass off. I think I'm hilarious. I think my colleague is hilarious. And on the other end, we are getting blank, nothing. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is already going poorly. Like, what is happening? But I wanna try the vulnerability thing instead. When we were first pitching 15, 17, I didn't think, oh, I have to go find investors. I just need to find people who want to talk to me about what I'm doing. And then I can talk to them about, hey, who do you know who I should talk to? So we were shameless. I was emailing just friends, like, hey, we're doing this new thing. Here's a blurb. Here's a pitch deck. Do you know anyone I should talk to? And so many of those people introduced us to other people who we needed to talk to, who were family offices or institutional investors. We didn't know who we were supposed to be pitching at all. And so one thing is talking to like people you know, people where, hey, I met this person at Responsive and it was really great, and I'm going to reach out and say hi, what I'm doing. Like, I find that especially in the Bay, people want to help each other. It's one of the really special qualities of this area is people know a lot of people, and people have their own stories of, hey, someone made an intro for me that really mattered. Someone had that hinge moment that like made a huge difference for me. So those are a couple strategies. One strategy also that I learned about more recently is someone else in the room is probably a major expert in this, but it's about energy management, and it's about keeping your energy like 10% higher than the person who you're talking with, and then bringing them up with you as you go. So one reason I think our like humor tactic doesn't work is because the energy is so different. It's like, we're getting blank. We're like, haha, funny thing. The delta's too big. So what we should be doing more is like learning, asking some questions, getting a sense for like, okay, what's the energy in the room, elevating it just a little bit. When they start matching our energy, then elevating it a little bit more. And I can't tell you how many times, especially, a lot of meetings are Zoom to start. We love in person and we try to do in person as much as possible, but there's still a lot that we do for Zoom. There's a lot of people who don't know how to hold themselves in a video call and keep that energy high and excited, and even just having some natural light on your face, like things like this make a really big difference. And you have really great energy. I sat with you at lunch and I was like, oh, I'm going to be sitting there, Andy. This is going to be great. So you want to keep cultivating that and bring that to the call, because people will feel that and respond to that. They always say, like, people remember how you made them feel, not what you said. Same in pitching.
Actually, I did. So I do think you're really funny. First and foremost.
But but that's because our vibes are similar.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. We're within 10% of each other. I did remember actually how I bait the vulnerability question. I just remembered it. So the reason for the kids' toys is because I want them to ask me, do you have kids? And then it allows me to ask them if they have kids. And what I found is that is the easiest way to get someone to open up, which is like, oh, you love your children? So do I. Right? How old are they? That kind of stuff, right? Yeah. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Andy. I feel like we could do this a lot more. I actually really want to talk to you both about a debate in the future, but let's give a responsive thank you, a standing ovation for these three incredible VCs. Thank you for coming on stage at Responsive Conference.